I have always been somebody that loves to read. And as I reflect on my childhood and my experience in school, I just don't think that anybody ever truly taught me how to read, how to learn. Obviously, I know how to read books, but I don't know how to actually retain this information, or at least I didn't. I have devoted a lot of time to learning how to learn again. And that is exactly what this video is about. I probably on average get 50 DMs, messages, emails a week surrounding what books am I currently reading. And at the end of this video, I'm going to share with you the 5 best books that you can read right now if you are trying to get better at the mental game. I will also include a PDF at the end. Maybe it's a link that you can click to see an entire list of books, more than 5 that I have read, that I am going to read, articles I've read that I've really enjoyed. It'll be a whole resource for you that just gives you more than just 5 books. And so, for everybody asking what books I'm reading or have read, you can find it there. Now, again, we are learning how to learn again. I remember being in college my freshman year. I was at Arizona State, and there was this book right here, ABCs of Pitching, Harvey Dorfman. I think Harvey Dorfman is such a beauty. The way that he articulates the mental game is one of one. But these are 2-page chapters. And when I was in college, I just remember being immensely overwhelmed by the information, and I had no idea how to retain it. I was scanning it. I was finding some kind of dopamine out of just thinking that I was learning. But as I look back on my process, the results I was getting were perfect for the process I had in place. I wasn't really retaining this information. And so as I've started to build my own business and I've fallen in love with learning, honestly, I just have found a better process to retain this information. And so today I'm going to break this up into 3 different levels of learning, 3 different levels of reading, because some of this might not be for everybody. I certainly go to the extreme. It's who I am as a human being. If a little bit is good, more is better. I remember taking a hitting lesson when I was a kid with one of my first hitting coaches ever, and he told me that I was the type of kid that if a little cough syrup made me feel better, I would drink the whole bottle. And so understand that I am going to the greatest extreme when it comes to retaining this information. This is my job. It's my job to articulate these ideas clearly, to take high level concepts and to break them down into digestible ways for you all to understand, for the athletes I work with to understand. I am really just a museum of everything that I've ever loved. And so I take this information and the things that I love, these overlapping principles, I take with me. I often tell myself that I think I am more of a researcher than I am a coach. I got to meet this stud, Billy Oppenheimer. He is the research assistant under Ryan Holiday and Rick Rubin. He said that originally. I loved it when he said it. He's more of a researcher than he is really an author. And I think I see myself as the same way. I love to coach, I love to work with athletes, but I really love to research. And so throughout this research, I've researched how to learn at a higher level. Now, before I dive into the 3 levels of reading, I want to give you a quick story from a recent conversation that I had. I got to meet with a stud who got to run the brand, help develop the brand of Gary Vee, Alex Hormozy, and many other great brands. And one of the things he said to me on that call that really inspired me was that people who are trying to do content today do it the wrong way because they are just taking from their competitors. Everything that they consume is about what they are doing. And I'm not telling you to not read books that you love, that you're excited about. Do it. Read books about the topics that you love. Really just read what you love until you love to read. That's a Naval Ravikant quote. But he said something that was really interesting to me, and I just want to preface with this. He told me that you should go find other things that you enjoy. So maybe it's fishing, maybe it's training your dog. I don't care really what it is. Maybe it's needle pointing, but you take these other resources, these other videos, he's saying, and take inspiration from those videos, and then take what you like from that and put your own spin on it for your personal interests. For me, it's the mental game. For me, it's the mind. And so if I go and I watch a video of Theo Vaughn doing a podcast, I can look at his podcast and how he talks about things, how he researches things, or whatever it is, and I can take something that I like from it, and then I can take that into what I'm doing here. That's a okay example of what I'm trying to talk about. But really, what I'm trying to encourage you to do is be willing to learn from things that you wouldn't typically expect to bring value to you. For example, I work with a lot of athletes, but I study great minds that have nothing to do with sports. For example, Steve Jobs, Jensen Huang, Elon Musk. I just got a brand new book right here. Let me grab it out. But I got this book from Eric Jorgensen. This is maybe one of those books that you guys can go and buy. You're asking me what books I read. It is called The Book of Elon by Eric Jorgensen. Eric Jorgensen's a stud. He takes the greatest ideas from the greatest minds and he puts them all into a book. That is a book that has nothing to do with sports, but it has everything to do with elite level thinking. And I can take these principles from this book and I can bring that into what I'm doing with the mental game. And so that's what I just want to say right away is that creativity knows no bounds. That's another Naval Ravikant quote. This is the reason that I have people go on artist dates is to increase their taste and to develop their taste. I think that you can learn from all different mediums of creativity, whether that is reading biographies, reading fiction, or reading nonfiction. I don't really care. Read what you like until you like to read, and give these other topics, these other types of literature an opportunity because I think you'll be surprised at how much it all overlaps. Once again, creativity knows no bounds. Now, as we go into the three levels of reading, the first thing that I have to define is marginalia. This is something that ties into every level of reading. So you have to understand what marginalia is. And simply put, I have it right here. Marginalia is notes, markings, or comments written in the margins of the book, of the document, whatever you're looking at, the article. And it says in a deeper level, marginalia is how you interact with what you are reading. Instead of passively consuming it, it turns reading into a conversation. You are not just taking in information, you are shaping it, challenging it, connecting it to your own thinking. Leads me to a quote from Ryan Holiday. I love Ryan Holiday. He's one of these great minds that truly knows how to learn. That's how he is putting out such great content. That's how his recall is so good, is he knows how to learn. Ryan Holiday says it is a two-way street between you and the author. You should be having arguments and discussions with the book, with the author. Now, as we go into the three levels of reading, the first thing I have to say is I prefer physical copies. Now, I have read on my Kindle. I have listened to audiobooks. I think these are great resources. There are other people out there, such as Ryan Holiday, who would tell you just to read physical books. You don't retain audiobooks, and I think there is some truth to that. I'm more so speaking when you are trying to really retain something and it really matters. It's not just kind of a passive listen for you, something you can listen to while you're working out. I think you should have a physical book. Ryan Holiday, I have a quote right here again. He says, reading should take you away from screens. I mean, we're on these damn phones so much, we probably should be away from our screens more. So this is a good opportunity for you to practice being present. This is a good opportunity for you to practice training your focus. So the first way to increase your attention for your reading is just to have conversations with the book. Be willing to argue with the book. Be willing to write notes in the book of things that it reminds you of. For example, this is the book ABCs of Pitching that I told you I was trying to read in college. And now that I still help pitchers in the mental game of baseball, I'm still reading it. Now, I take a ton of notes and here I'm highlighting. It's just a loving conversation. What I'm trying to do here is I'm highlighting the parts that are very big for me that I really enjoy. I'm circling things that stand out to me, and then I'm writing little notes in the margins. I'm writing things that I like. So, for example, mantras are based on behaviors, task-oriented thoughts, positive and rational. I wrote down, all I do is execute one pitch at a time. That is a quote from a different chapter in this book. And so this chapter made me think about a previous chapter. I'm going to write that in the margins. So next time I think about mantra, I think, which is the chapter I'm talking about here, I think about the chapter execution, where he talks about Greg Maddux. All I do is execute one pitch at a time. 53 of 72 pitches executed. I can remember that because I took those notes and I refer to it on these pages. Again, mantra and execution are now tied together because I wrote down in the margins the connection. Now, I also wrote things here like we can only think about one thing at a time. And then I referenced the book, It Takes What It Takes. That's a Trevor Moawad book. He talks about the law of substitution, how you can only hold one thought in your mind at a time. And so this is my first way of learning to retain books better. Write in the margins. Just write about things that you like. Have a conversation with it. I do this in my Bible. You can see this here. I am always having conversations with my book, no matter what the book is. Here's another example. God Has a Name. This is a book that I absolutely want to retain and I absolutely want to remember as much as I can, but it's not as important as a book as maybe Power of Now. I think the Power of Now is a lot more applicable to how I'm coaching, to the things that I need to know. And so that's a more intentional way of retaining. I'm going to get to that in a moment. But here you can see I'm just having a loving conversation with it. I'm highlighting the things that I like. I think they call these dog earing certain pages so I can go back to it. But this is the first step to retaining information at a higher level. Now, something that you might be thinking right now is, man, I love how beautiful my book is. I don't really want to write on it. I don't want to mess my book up. And to that, I would say, this is your book and you get to do with it what you want. But these books are meant to be tasted. They're meant to be felt. Ryan Holiday talks about how he's reading when he's eating and he has food stains all over his book and he's dog-earing these pages. I do believe that books are supposed to look like this. It's almost an art. You're supposed to experience the book. Ryan Holiday says that if anybody comes up to him at an event with his book and they're like, "Man, I loved your book so much," and there's no notes in the book, it looks like a perfect book. It just tells him that the person who read this book didn't actually experience the book. They just more so skimmed over the book. Now, the second way of retaining information is certainly more extreme and it's certainly more time consuming. But if you do this in the right way, this will actually save you time because you're able to, instead of trying to cram and go remember everything that you learned, you're able to go through and read your notes. And so instead of just writing a conversation with the book, the way that I go about it here, and you can see it in the Power of Now, it's a lot more extreme, is you read paragraph one and you summarize it into a sentence. Why do we do a sentence? It's because this is so much information that it's going to be challenging for you to shorten it down and condense this idea into one sentence. And so if you do that, you have to really think about the material. And if you really think about the material, it's going to increase your understanding of the material. So paragraph one, we're going to write a one sentence summary in the margins. We're going to read paragraph two. We're going to write a one sentence summary in the margins. Then we're going to read paragraph three. And this is where things change. In paragraph three, we're going to write a one sentence summary of paragraph three, and then we're going to write another sentence, and this sentence summarizes paragraph one and two. And now we go on to paragraph four. We are going to summarize paragraph four in one sentence, and then we're going to summarize paragraph one, two, three in one sentence. And we're going to carry this on all the way until the end of the chapter. And then the way that I do it is at the end of the chapter, I start over. Now, obviously, this is extreme. This is really, if you want to retain the information, this is the greatest way I know. It takes time, but again, if you are just skimming, the time that it's going to take to go back and read the entire book again or try to cram it is greater than you just going through it one time and taking really good notes. And if you ever have to go back, you can just read your one sentence summaries and it will give you a summary of what's going on. So I'll give you an example here. This is from The Power of Now. I wrote down that the joy of being stems from discontinuity of mental stream. I wrote no self, which follows observance. And then I wrote for the next paragraph, fully presence raises your frequency, and it is not through lowering consciousness. And I wrote for the next paragraph, as you experience your no mind, you are officially greater than your environment. And bliss is not in the materialistic, but it is in pure consciousness. So those are my one sentence summaries. And then I wrote a one sentence summary of paragraph one and two. I said, observing the mind from a separate viewer allows for higher frequency and leads to no mind, which is where we find bliss. And so that's an example I could carry on here with you, but you're understanding what I'm saying. That is the second way that I would encourage you to retain this information. I tell you to do this with podcast transcripts, do this with articles, do this with newspapers. I don't care what it is. This is a great tool for you to retain information, whatever you do. Now, these notes here, I'm going to quote Billy Oppenheimer, who's a good friend of mine. I've learned so much from Billy Oppenheimer. He is a phenomenal newsletter. He's writing a book currently, and it's just a beauty. I will talk about him more in the future for sure. But I heard a podcast from him, and he's talking about how these notes in your book are notes for a stranger, because that is really what you are as you come back to this book, a stranger. And so leave yourself notes so you can go back and reference what you're learning. Now, the third level to reading is something that I'm actually new to trying. I learned this from Billy Oppenheimer. I learned this from Ryan Holiday. Ryan Holiday talks about how he learned this from Robert Greene, who was his mentor, who wrote The 48 Laws of Power. He's a great mind as well. And so this is probably more so for the books that you have loving conversations with, where it's just some notes. I think you can also do it with the second format that I showed you, the more intense, how I did this with The Power of Now, where you have all these notes, the summaries, the sentences. I think you could do this with any kind of annotation that you've done. If you're going to do the second level of reading where you are writing the sentences like this, I would encourage you to dog ear pages. These are the pages that hit the most for you, that you enjoyed the most, and you would go back. So let's say I go back to, this page here in the book, God Has a Name. And I would write down on page 62, I'd write that in the lower left-hand corner, page 62. He talks about the future is not set in stone. The prayers we pray and the decisions we make in the here and now have a direct line of sight effect on what does or does not happen down the line because God responds. And so I would write the theme is prayer, right? Like the power of prayer. I'm a mental performance coach that talks a lot about the faith component. I think faith is the greatest mental game. And so I would write prayer because prayer needs to be a part of your life if you are a faith-based athlete. And I would write that God responds, and I would write that the future is not set in stone. Then I'll write prayer plus decisions affect what does / doesn't happen. And then you can write the name of the book. Just remember, I'd write God Has a Name. So once again, this is kind of a newer process for me, but this is what it would look like. I'd write the theme, I'd write what it was about, I'd write the page number, and then in my filing cabinet right here, based on the themes of what I'm reading, I would put this in. And so it'd be the theme of prayer. And then next time I read something in the Bible about prayer, I would reference the page, I would reference what piece of scripture it is, and then I would also put that in the same category. And so next time I'm trying to review on prayer, I could pull out these note cards and review. Obviously, this is extreme. Obviously, this is not for everybody, but for somebody who is in the education space, this is a really good system for me. And so once again, to summarize what we just spoke about, there are 3 ways to retain this information in a better way. Have a loving conversation with your book. Talk to your book about connection points, reference points that overlap with this idea that you are learning about. That's number 1. The second way is to summarize each paragraph in one sentence. One more time. Paragraph 1, one sentence. Paragraph 2, one sentence. Paragraph 3, one sentence on paragraph 3, and then one sentence summarizing paragraph 1, summarizing paragraph 2 in one. And again, it's going to force you to condense this information into the biggest points, and it's going to force you to think about what you are reading, which is going to naturally increase your retention. And then again, number 3 is just the note card system. It's going back through the book after you've read it and taking notes on what you just read and categorizing it based on themes. Have a filing cabinet that is organized. Ryan Holiday calls it a commonplace book. He talks about all the great people that have done this in the past. And this is a new system that I am trying. Now, before I give you these books that I would recommend that you read if you're interested in learning about the mental game, I'm going to give you a couple bonus notes that I wrote down here. I said that passive listening is better than doing nothing. So if you listen to someone like Ryan Holiday, he doesn't recommend you listen to audiobooks. I love audiobooks. When I had this conversation with Billy Oppenheimer, he told me that Ryan Holiday and Rick Rubin fill their mind constantly with great things. Ryan Holiday might be reading it, and that's okay, but Rick Rubin is the guy that I've heard who is kicking around in the water, just kicking around for the first hour of his day, listening to a great audiobook, watching great movies, listening to great music. I don't care what it is, but we should always be filling our mind with great things. There's a book called The Art of Spending Money. I love it. I like Morgan Housel. I want to learn more about spending money and being smart with my money, but it's just not the most important book. These other books mean more to me. And so The Art of Spending Money would be a book that I passively listen to while I lift. And if I really like something, I text my own number, something that I really liked with a timestamp, and I go back, and that's an opportunity to make a note card. I don't hate audiobooks. I actually really like listening to fiction audiobooks. I think it's better than nothing. And so if you don't try any of the retention strategies that I just gave you, I would tell you go ahead and listen to audiobooks. And then if you really like something, timestamp it, go back, make a note card. My second bonus note is to read what you like until you like to read. I took that straight from Naval Ravikant. If you don't want to read these self-help books, that's fine. Read a fiction book that you enjoy. My third talking point, and this is something I'm hesitant to say because I'm sure kids watch this, but Alex Hormozy is a great marketing mind, and he always talks about how always just consuming content and just reading books can be a form of mental masturbation. And it's a terrible way to say it in a way, but it's also a really good way to say it. Sometimes people just skim over books and it makes them feel productive. And what I'm trying to give you here is a system to work so that you don't waste your time and you can actually retain this information. My fourth point is just to read every chance you get and to abuse the books that you have. They don't have to look pretty. If anything, they are your books and they should have character. They should look like you've read them. They should have your notes in them. And when you go back and read them for the second time, because no man steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same man and it's not the same river, every time you pick up a book, you are experiencing the book at a different part in your life. You will take different things away from it. I got a book on my wall, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. I've probably read that book 5 times. And every time I read it, I take different things away. Now, my last two reminders is just to read every single chance you get. Read while you eat, read while you're waiting in line, read while you're sitting in your car. I think you should bring a book with you everywhere you go and just read every chance you have. I think focus is the art of knowing what to ignore, and it's never been easier to win. The world is so distracted, and people are constantly scrolling on their phones. And so we can truly develop our ability to focus. We can truly develop our mind. We could truly just be a better human if we are willing to do the things that other people are not doing. And the entire world is constantly consuming from social media, which is frying their focus, frying their dopamine. And so earn your dopamine, no cheap dopamine. Read every chance you get. Fall in love with reading. It's one of the greatest things you can do. And my last point before I give you the books that I would recommend is that, again, you should do this with articles. You should do this with podcast transcripts. You should do this reading retention strategy, any of the three, with anything that you love. Okay, let's dive into the books that I would recommend. Some of these books you've probably heard of before. I've probably talked about them before. I tried to be intentional not to just recommend the same books I always talk about, but some of them you will have heard before. So sorry about it. But right away, Brianna Weiss, The Mountain Is You. So good. It's all about self-sabotage. Simply put, athletes I've seen at every single level sabotage themselves in some way. Things start to go well for you, and you start to tell yourself a story that is disempowering, sabotaging yourself. And it's just something very interesting to explore. And this book does a really good job of discussing what self-sabotage is and the different ways you can self-sabotage. And it's just such a good book for anybody, whether you're an athlete or you're not, to read. She is such a good writer. I cannot recommend this one enough. The Mountain Is You. The second book is The Alchemist. The company that I run is called Stay in Process. This book is all about process, but it talks about it in an indirect way. It talks about how everything you need is already within you. And one of my favorite things that it talks about in here is omens. And you've heard me talk about the artist's way before, but she talks about how when you are aligned on the path, 100 unseen helping hands will be there to support you. And this book teaches you all about omens. On the back, it says, to realize one's destiny is a person's only obligation. The next book, you've heard about it, Man's Search for Meaning. What is it? Man's Search for Meaning. And I went to the Tony Robbins event, and he talks all the time about how the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your emotions. Now, the quality of your emotions, which are just energy and motion, your emotions are determined by the meaning that you attach to certain situations. And so this book talks about an individual who goes into a concentration camp, who is a psychotherapist, and he's observing people as well as observing himself. And what he realizes is that you always have your choice. In between stimulus and response, you always have your choice. And whatever choice you make there Whatever you choose, however you choose to see the situation will determine what happens in your life. Once again, the meaning that you choose to have determines the quality of emotions you feel, and that determines the quality of your life. I always think about when I see this book, Clint Eastwood saying, "Every day I wake up and I don't let the old man in." That's how he's still making movies at almost 100 years old. Is he's choosing to associate a greater meaning with his current situation. He's choosing to have an outlook that is empowering. Man's search for meaning will serve you in anything you do. The next one is Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza. I would really recommend any of his books. This is a really good book that teaches you a lot about meditation, but it also teaches you about, you have this unconscious mind, which is your body, and the language for your mind is thoughts, the language for your body is emotions, and we can legitimately recondition our unconscious mind, our body, to a new conscious mind through intentional breath work, through intentional meditation, by just having a deeper understanding of a lot of this stuff. Look at, I opened the page, reconditioning the body to a new mind. How about that? Um, Transparently, when I first read this, it was not this physical copy, so that's why there's not many notes in here. But I think I'm going to go back through this and follow the framework that I just taught you guys about being able to retain this information in a greater way. So this book is dense and this book is very science backed. And so you are going to need to go through this slow. But if you have it in you, this book will change your life. Becoming Supernatural, Joe Dispenza. Last one, It Takes What It Takes. You've heard all about this, but this is all about the power of neutral thinking. He writes this in a way that is very digestible, very applicable. And he teaches you again about neutral thinking, but he teaches you about how emotion is biased. There's nothing relevant other than the task at hand, which complements many of the other books I've read. He talks about a negativity diet that is from this book. If you've ever heard me speak about that, he literally doesn't let the people he works with listen to country music, which is crazy, and you'll have to read the book to figure out why. But these are probably the 5 books that I would recommend. The only bonus book that I was hesitant to include in this video is The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. In this book, you're going to learn about how, you shouldn't really care what people think about you, but you also shouldn't really care what you think about you. And so I really highly recommend this, especially if you're new to your faith. Um, and even if you've been in your faith, I think this is a beautiful book. It's talking all about the how to have a supernaturally changed heart. It says, what are the marks of a supernaturally changed heart? This is one of the questions that the Apostle Paul addresses as he writes to the church in Corinth. He's not after some superficial outward tinkering, but instead a deep-rooted, life-altering change that takes place on the inside. In an age where pleasing people, puffing up your ego, and building your resume are seen as the methods to make it, the Apostle Paul calls us to find true rest in blessed self-forgetfulness. A truly gospel humble person is not a self-hating person or a self-loving person, but a self-forgetful person. This freedom can be yours. And so those are the books that I would recommend just off the rip with you. I'm going to give you guys a lot more recommendations in the PDF that is in the description below. So go ahead and click that. I'll include a description of why I think that you should read these books, but it's all just too much for one video. So go ahead and check it out there. Those are the books I'd recommend for now. Grateful for you guys. Keep stacking them.